A 15-year-old girl went into the forest to paint the sunset and never returned. Authorities ruled it an accident, but her final drawings hinted at something far darker. Then came a missing worker, a blood-stained helmet, and a scrap of rope buried in the mud. What her mother uncovered would expose a truth the entire town had tried to bury. The small wooden kitchen, nestled at the edge of the forest like a low note in an autumn symphony, echoed with the steady sound of water flowing from the sink. Sunlight streamed through the dusty window pane, gently touching the white porcelain dishes and the salt and pepper hair falling loosely across Ava's forehead. She wasn't looking outside, only focused on the running water and the clinking of a spoon. Behind her, Lena, her daughter, sat cross-legged on the floor, slowly mixing paint on her palette as if the whole world were contained within each drop of blue and red. "I think today will be the most beautiful day," Lena said softly without looking up. Ava didn't respond. She knew that her daughter's today was a very personal day, out of sync with calendars or weather reports. "I want to go to the western slope, to paint the sunset." Ava stopped what she was doing. That name, the western slope, wasn't unfamiliar, but each time she heard it, it brought a chill. It was a construction site. New wooden stakes, tire tracks etched in the earth. Empty, rough, not a place for a 15-year-old girl to sit and paint. "They're doing construction there. It'll be noisy." "I know. But no one will be working after 3 in the afternoon. They all go home." Lena looked up. Her eyes were clear, dark, and strangely calm. It wasn't a demanding or rebellious look, just a gaze that made Ava feel that if she refused, she'd be showing a lack of faith in her daughter. "Did you take a jacket?" "Yes, Mom. Be back before dark." "Yes, Mom." Ava watched Lena put on her canvas backpack, tucking inside her sketchbook, watercolors, and a book of Van Gogh's paintings. She kept watching until the girl disappeared behind the trees, never imagining it would be the last time she saw her. 5 p.m. The sun set faster than usual. The wind suddenly turned cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves from the forest all the way to the porch. 6 p.m. Ava finished preparing dinner. She called, but no one answered. 6:15 p.m. She called again. Still no signal, no ring, as if the phone was off. 6:30 p.m. It wasn't late, not enough to be worried. That's what Ava told herself. But her stomach had begun to churn, as if something inside was contracting, tighter and tighter. The kitchen light was still on, the water in the kettle had cooled, and the light outside was fading into a leaden gray. Ava got up from the table, pacing aimlessly around the house. Each footstep seemed to make the wooden floor echo louder than usual. Then she stopped abruptly in front of the coat rack near the door. Without another thought, she grabbed her coat, stuffed a flashlight in her pocket, grabbed her boots, which were still wet halfway, and opened the door. She hadn't thought about where she was going. She only knew she couldn't sit and wait any longer. A light drizzle swept across her face, so gentle it felt like the forest's breath. But it was cold as a whetstone on the skin. Ava stepped slowly onto the familiar path, her boots sinking deep into the mud. The forest path was like a shadowy corridor where the shadows of the trees stretched into grotesque shapes. Wet weeds wrapped around her pants as if trying to hold her back. The wind swept across the ground, carrying the smell of decaying grass and damp earth. This space, which during the day was where Lena played, set up her easel and said that the light here is as beautiful as in paintings. Now, it was like a waterlogged dream. "Lena!" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm and urgent. Part of it was hoarse from the cold. No one answered. Only the sound of water dripping from dry branches and the wind blowing through the leaves like the whispers of someone who didn't want to be understood. "Lena, honey, where are you? Say something." She shone the flashlight to the left, a large tree stump, something like a scrap of fabric. She rushed toward it, her heart pounding, her head spinning. Number just a patch of wet moss. The flashlight swung to the right, broken wooden stakes, similar to the kind used by survey teams. Eva bent down. No blood, no signs of dragging, no pieces of a backpack, only emptiness. An emptiness that seemed to be enveloping her from all directions. The clock was approaching 8 p.m. She couldn't hear anything but her own heartbeat. The darkness was growing thicker, and the forest seemed to be receding further and further from her reach. Eva continued to walk, despite the flashlight dimming from the rain. She had passed 3 small forest clearings, crossed an old trail that she had told Lena never to go on alone. Now she couldn't even tell which path she was following. A dry ditch appeared ahead, puddles of stagnant water. Eva slipped, nearly falling, but she caught herself with both hands. Mud covered her sleeves. She sat panting, her chest tight as if someone were squeezing it. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. "Mom's here, honey. Please. If you can hear me, say something," Eva mumbled, her voice choked. She continued to walk, her feet beginning to feel numb. Her hands were now shaking not only from the cold, but from a fear that was taking shape. Nothing. Not a trace. Not a sound. And no one to confirm whether Lena had ever been here. Each step brought a glimmer of hope, then immediately snuffed it out. When night had completely fallen and she could no longer distinguish between the sky and the forest, Eva knew the worst had come. Not death, but a question that no one, no evidence, no map could answer. Where was Lena? And how long had she, her mother, let her daughter disappear before realizing it? The next morning, a search team was dispatched. They found Lena's body at the foot of a cliff over 6 meters high. The location was almost a kilometer away from where she usually painted. It wasn't the western forest where she said she would go, but the slope behind the old mine, where nobody goes. Lena lay on her side, her eyes closed. Her left hand was outstretched, a bruise on the back of her head. No torn skin, no blood, no other major scratches. The wristwatch, the one Eva had bought her for her birthday, was found more than 20 meters away. A young police officer approached Eva and said softly, "It could be an accident, a slip, because of the heavy rain last night." Eva didn't respond. She only looked at her daughter, not crying, not screaming, not collapsing. Her lips were pressed together, white as a sheet. Her eyes were wide open, but as if looking through the earth. Light flooded the hillside. The sun shone down on the cliff, creating streaks of orange and gold that stretched across the forest. Just as Lena had said, this was the day with the most beautiful light. But there was no one left to paint it. The town's morgue was located behind the administrative area, so stifling and cold that there was no room for any emotion. A young man in a blue uniform came out, holding a pre-printed form, his voice dry as if he had repeated the sentence 100 times. "Mrs. Eva Larson, biological mother of Lena Larson?" Eva simply nodded. "You can identify the body and sign the death certificate here. Then, if you choose cremation, the service will be conducted at the end of the week." "What's the conclusion about my daughter's death?" Eva asked, her voice hoarse as if her throat was sealed with ashes. "Accident." The employee glanced at the paper. "The victim is believed to have lost her balance or slipped from a height due to the steep and wet terrain. There are no signs of violent assault, no witnesses." Eva didn't look at the paper. She looked at him, not with a questioning gaze, but as if searching for any sign of truth left after those words. But there was nothing. The face was as empty as the morgue walls. The forensic doctor was a gray-haired man, his glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, speaking politely as if giving a lecture to students. He gave Eva a thin folder with some black and white photos, some measurements. "The bruise on the back of the head isn't deep," he said, pointing to a shadowy area in the photo. "Most likely from an impact when falling. No signs of sharp objects, no broken bones, no broken fingernails." Eva didn't say anything. She saw her hand trembling slightly, as if something inside her wanted to spill out, but couldn't find a way. It could be an accident, the doctor repeated, this time more gently. The forest is steep, the weather is wet, kids, you know. But she's afraid of heights, Eva said, almost whispering. Excuse me? Lena, she's afraid of heights. She would never dare to go near the edge of a slope. The doctor didn't answer immediately. He just frowned slightly and nodded like people nod when they hear a small, irrelevant matter. When Eva received Lena's belongings, a dirty canvas bag, a water-stained sketchbook, and a wristwatch, she didn't expect the small item to shake her so deeply. Neighbors visited, not many. Some brought bouquets of chrysanthemums, some brought cookies or warm soup. They didn't stay long, just sitting for 5 or 10 minutes, saying the familiar phrases, "It's such a terrible thing. She was such a good girl, who would have thought, if only someone had gone with her." And then, when they thought Eva couldn't hear, someone mumbled to another, "Who lets their child go into the forest alone?" A blonde-haired neighbor woman said directly to Eva as she was leaving, "I know you're in pain, but an accident is an accident. You have to accept it." Accept. That word stabbed Eva like a dull knife. The house returned to silence. No one knocked anymore. No one called anymore. Everyone had done their part, offered condolences, sighed, baked cookies, and sent flowers. Now, everyone was back to their daily lives. Only Eva remained in an unnamed pain. She didn't clean Lena's room, didn't touch the shawl she always wore when she went out. It was still hanging on the door hook, soft, smelling of pine and paint. Sometimes Eva took it, holding it close to her chest, as if the remaining scent could extinguish the growing void in her heart. Then she sat down on the living room floor, the shawl still in her hand, and was silent. No lights, no water, no heater, just sitting like that, through a night, then a day. The next afternoon, the police called. They asked if Eva wanted to arrange the funeral soon. According to procedure, cremation could be scheduled within the week. "You need to close the case and overcome the pain to continue living," the man's voice said on the phone, very sincerely. "Time will heal the wounds." Eva looked at the phone as if looking at a foreign object. She wasn't angry. She just found it strange that people thought they could close something that had never been opened properly. She hung up the phone and sat silently. Eva had never been the type to believe in signs. She didn't keep lucky charms, didn't believe in horoscopes, and had never thought dreams could tell her anything. But in the days after Lena's death, when the pain no longer stayed quietly in her chest, but seeped into every object, sound, and light, Eva began to feel that something was waiting for her. Not an omen, but a piece of the truth left somewhere, like a bone not yet collected from the wound. Because she believed her daughter was not careless or playful, even if she was always full of energy. She always knew where to stop and come home on time. That was certain, and so, behind Lena's death, there were still many secrets. The first clues began in Lena's room. No one asked her to clean up, but no one stopped her either. The room was as silent as a shed skin. The pillow still had the imprint of her hair, the sheets were rumpled, the window was slightly ajar, and the smell of paint still lingered on the desk. The late afternoon light shone through the curtains, covering the floor with a thin layer of gold, making the dust particles rise like ashes that hadn't completely fallen to the ground. Eva walked in, slowly and lightly, as if afraid of disturbing a dream. She pulled up a chair to the drawing table. On the table was Lena's sketchbook, next to a watercolor box with some dried-up wells. Eva opened the sketchbook, for the first time since the funeral. The drawings appeared. Forests, streaks of sunlight, shadows of trees, a fawn, all familiar, in light green and pale yellow. But the further she flipped, the more different the drawings became. Darker and darker. A charcoal drawing of a person turning their back, standing next to something that looked like a wooden milestone. Then another. The person was closer, but their face was unclear. There was something distorted in the way Lena drew the outlines of the face, as if trying to depict something that she had never seen clearly enough. Ava stopped at a page that was half torn. The tear was uneven, jagged. She picked up the scrap of paper left on the floor, piecing it back together. It didn't match perfectly, but it was enough to see the mouth was wide open. The man in the painting was screaming, or terrified. A chill ran down her spine, not because of the drawing, but because of the thought that her daughter had seen something that terrified her so much that she couldn't finish the painting, but still kept painting, as if doing so was the only way she wouldn't be swallowed. The next morning, Ava went to school. The homeroom teacher greeted her with a sympathetic look, offered polite condolences, and invited her into the office. But Ava didn't stay long. She only wanted to meet one person, Sarah, Lena's best friend. Sarah was a curly-haired girl with glasses, wise beyond her years. When Ava sat down next to her in the schoolyard, Sarah didn't cry. She just bit her lip, her hands clasped together under the table. "I know she used to tell you things," Ava began. "Did Lena tell you anything about the past few days?" Sarah was silent for a moment. Then she nodded. "Lena said, there was a man in the forest. He often walked around the survey area wearing a hard hat. Sometimes he just stood there shouting, even though no one was around." "Shouting?" "Yes, like arguing, but no one answered." Ava sat up straight. "Was she scared?" "She said she was scared, but she also wanted to draw it. Lena said, the light when he was standing there was very beautiful, like brutality and beauty." That phrase, brutality and beauty, pierced Ava like a needle, not because it was flowery, but because it was exactly Lena's kind of language, a child who was both sensitive and tenacious. The beauty wasn't enough for her to turn away, but made her want to understand more. That noon, Ava went home and opened her laptop. She wasn't tech-savvy, but she knew enough to find public information. After 2 hours of searching, she accessed the construction schedule for the Western Forest, where Lena said she would go that day. On that day, a geological survey team was registered to operate from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Team leader, Graham Leeds. She typed that name into the search box. Some old articles appeared, nothing serious, but one anonymous post talked about his uncontrolled behavior towards subordinates. But the post was restricted. Eva gritted her teeth. The list of workers that day had 8 names. She read each name, each note, and then she saw Matthew K., assistant engineer, took sudden leave from the day of the incident and didn't return to work. No reason given. Eva stopped. The feeling inside her suddenly changed. No longer pain or regret, but something sharper. A connection was forming, not clear but intense, between a man shouting in the forest, a girl who didn't come home, and a worker who disappeared. What had her daughter seen? And why hadn't anyone bothered to ask where that young man had gone? That night, Ava sat in front of Lena's drawing table once again. She picked up the last unfinished painting, hard pencil strokes, areas of darkness rubbed in strongly. In the right corner was a diagonal line, like something streaked quickly with a trembling hand. Wind, or a hurried hand. She placed her finger on the drawing. A silent moment, as if a thin breath touched her fingertip. Eva whispered, "Tell me, honey. Mom's listening." There was no answer, only the feeling that the gaze of her daughter had once been directed towards that side, was still open. Somewhere, in the forest, in a report, in the name crossed off the list of workers, and she, at all costs, would follow that gaze to the end. This town was so small that every road led back to the same place. People had known each other since elementary school, drank coffee at the same cafe, and had weddings in the same church. But when something happened, that familiarity didn't lead to closeness, but to silence, as if everyone was in agreement to keep something silent, not out of malice, but out of fear. Eva began to understand that on the morning she knocked on the door of Matthew's mother. The house was light yellow, with a mossy roof, nestled on a dirt road full of potholes. The wooden door was rickety. The window curtains were drawn as if afraid that the light would awaken a ghost that had been sleeping for too long. The woman who opened the door was a gaunt old woman, gray hair early, wearing a sweater that reached her knees. She wasn't surprised to see Eva standing there, nor was she pleased. She just blinked once, as if she had been prepared for this. "Are you Matthew's mother?" Eva asked, her voice light but firm. The woman looked at Eva and then nodded slightly. "I know your son has disappeared and that there are many secrets behind it, like my daughter." Eva paused, no need to repeat it. The rest of the sentence hung in the air. "Matthew is no longer here," she said, then squinted. "He's gone. Don't look for him anymore." "What do you mean? Is he still alive? Does he contact you?" Silence. Eva felt the heavy breath from the ajar door. Behind the door, the house was still lit, cozy, with the smell of baking bread. Yet this mother stood in the doorway like a shadow. Then the woman replied, "You won't find out anything more from me. My son has gone far away. I'm very sorry about your daughter. But please, I must ask you to leave." Eva walked away with a heavy heart. Sitting in the small cafe in the center of town, Eva felt tired for the first time. Not physically, but mentally. As if for the past 2 weeks, she had been pulling an endless thread from the abyss to the surface. And until now, the thread hadn't touched anything. In front of her was a white porcelain cup, cold. Outside the glass, a group of geological workers were still talking and laughing. One of them was wearing a jacket with the mining company logo, the name Eva had seen in the list the other day. She stood up, stepped out, went to their table. "Excuse me, I'm Lena Larson's mother," she said, her voice trying to keep its balance. "I need to ask you a few things." The group fell silent. Some immediately turned away. A short, bespectacled man, younger than she thought, frowned. "We don't know anything more. We finished work that day." Their attitude seemed evasive, but Eva persisted in asking them. "Matthew was your colleague. He disappeared that day. No one wondered why?" The man glanced around, then said softly, almost whispering, "He asked for leave and that's all we know." Another person, older with gray hair at the temples, put his hand on Eva's shoulder like a comforting gesture, but didn't dare look her in the eye. He said slowly, his voice choked, "There are things. We know, but saying them won't help anyone. Be careful. There are people who don't want this to be dug up." Eva looked at each person, each averted gaze, each embarrassed hand. No one looked straight. No one dared to stand still under her gaze. Only the sound of a spoon stirring coffee touched the edge of a cup, like metal touching bone. But that evening, an important development came. An email was sent to Eva's inbox. No sender name, no title, just the first line. "I can't go public, but you need to know." The message was short, typed quickly, no punctuation. Graham was once threatened by Matthew that he would report, because he discovered that the location map had been altered to report the wrong location of the mine. Matthew said he would send it to the management. Graham was very angry. They argued on the 12th. Everyone knew, but no one said anything. Then Matthew took leave. "Don't trust the silence. It doesn't mean nothing happened, but that a truth is being hidden." Eva read the last line again and again. Don't trust the silence. The sentence was exactly what she had felt since Lena's death. Something wasn't right. Not from what was said, but from all the things that weren't said. The next day, Eva went to the forest where Lena said she would go that day. The path had been spread with gravel. At the foot of the survey stakes was a patch of dry, uneven mud. There were some faded red rope loops hanging on the ground. She bent down and saw a scrap of nylon rope tangled in the roots of a tree. Small, muddy. Perhaps it had been used to mark the stakes. Eva wrapped it in a handkerchief. She said nothing. She made no assumptions. She only knew something from that day was still here. She took the piece of rope home, sending it anonymously to a DNA testing lab in the city, through a secure courier service. She didn't report it to the police. She didn't tell anyone. Ava no longer believed that anyone would listen if she shouted. Before leaving the scene, she turned back to look. Under the gray light of the afternoon, the forest looked like an unfinished painting. The gaunt tree trunks were like unfinished brushstrokes. No birdsong, no new footprints. Only the wind blowing through the dry branches and a mother standing still, holding evidence, as if trying to hold on to the last thread connecting her to the truth. When she returned to the construction site that afternoon, not to investigate, just to look, Ava saw that they were closing the temporary fence. Workers passed by. No one greeted her. They avoided her gaze like people avoided a ray of bright sunshine in the middle of winter, not because they hated it, but because they couldn't bear the weight. She stood there, in the barren land, still holding the piece of rope tightly, feeling like the last stake that hadn't been pulled up. The wind swept past like tearing at her ears, carrying something unspoken. And then, for the first time since her daughter's death, Ava felt anger. Not a loud outburst, but a quiet, slow anger, like groundwater eroding beneath solid ground. No one was on her daughter's side, but she would still stand, even if she was alone. The rented room was nestled behind the train station, on the second floor of an old corrugated iron building, the walls stained and peeling. Outside, rain poured down in heavy bursts, making all sounds seem muffled in fabric. Ava sat on the edge of the bed, one hand holding a cold cup of tea, the other holding tightly to an envelope. It was the test result, a color laser print, 4 pages, sent back after 7 days. 7 days as long as a stretched-out wait. She didn't open it immediately. All afternoon it lay on the table, silent, as if waiting for her to be ready to look directly at what she had sensed all along. When the clock struck 8 p.m., Ava slowly tore open the edge of the envelope. Her hand didn't shake, but her heart had stopped beating in rhythm. The first page was a summary table of the comparison results. The nylon rope used to tie the stakes, sample number 004, contained the DNA of 2 people. One was male, matching 97% to the public sample of Graham Leeds. The other was female, blood type B, matching Lena Larson's hair sample. The second page, excerpt. The soil structure attached under the victim's fingernails has a mineral ratio and organic distribution that completely matches the land recorded at Survey Lot X32, 842 meters from the location where the body was found. The third page was a scanned image of Lena's wrist, faint, diagonal marks. Below was the note, most likely caused by being pulled or trying to escape from a restraint. Ava stopped there for a long time. In the dilapidated rented room, she sat still, her back bent as if wanting to hug herself. Outside, the sound of rain drumming on the corrugated iron roof was incessant, as if the world was knocking on the door, but no one answered. The girl didn't die where they found her. Lena had been dragged away, maybe on his shoulder, maybe dragged. She had struggled, maybe cried, and under her fingernails, there was still soil, as if she was trying to carry the last evidence for her mother. Ava bit her lip until it bled. She had never thought that being right could hurt so much. She turned to the last page, a short note from the lab. Recommendation. There are signs that the location where the body was found was not the scene of the accident or death. It is highly likely that the body was moved. Ava could no longer hear the rain. In her head there was only one image, Lena, with her feet dragging on the ground, being dragged away by someone like a discarded object. No farewell. That morning, Ava went to the police station. She brought the test results, topographical maps, the construction diagram for the day of the incident, all clipped in a thick folder, carefully marked. The person on duty was a young officer who seemed to have just changed shifts. "Who do you want to see?" he asked, not looking her in the eye. "I need to see the chief investigator." Ava placed the folder on the table. "I have evidence that my daughter didn't die in an accident. I want to request a reinvestigation." The officer picked up the folder, flipping through a few pages. Not reading, just flipping. "We've closed the case file. There are no signs of criminal activity." "What about Graham's DNA on the rope?" What about the matching soil sample? What about the marks on her wrist? He looked up, his eyes a little annoyed. Mrs. Larson, we are very sorry for your loss, but civilian data and external test samples are not sufficient legal basis to reopen a closed case. If you want, you can file a petition with the district court, but I'm not sure it will go anywhere. Eva said nothing. She looked at the officer as if looking through a thick pane of glass. Then she picked up the folder, stood up. Her voice was low, but clear. You know what? When I was little, my mother used to say, if you shout in a crowded market, someone will turn around. But if you shout in the forest, no one will know you ever existed. The officer didn't respond. That night, Eva returned to the rented room, sitting alone in the dim yellow light. She put all the papers back on the table, arranging each one, labeling each sample. Outside, it was still raining. Each drop painted another crack on the wall that no one could see. Sometimes, Eva opened the photo of Lena's wrist again, not to analyze, but just to wonder. Did she have time to think of anything? Did she have time to remember her mother? Near midnight, she burst into tears. She cried for the loss, cried for her belief that she was right to believe her daughter. When the whole world suspected that she was playful, she had been careless. When the tears had subsided, Eva wiped her face, stood up, and tied her hair neatly. There are things that people can't forget. There are things that people can't forgive. And if justice refuses to listen to a mother, then she will make it listen. Even if she has to repeat the story 100 times, even if she has to tell each person, each place, even if she has to go alone to the end. The waiting room of the law office was filled with white light, the smell of coffee mixed with the scent of freshly printed documents. Eva sat on the edge of the chair, the folder in her hand, her shoes wet from crossing a rainy street that morning. She had been to 3 other offices before. All of them politely refused. The reasons, although different in wording, were basically not enough legal basis. This time, the person who saw her was a woman in her 40s, wearing black-rimmed glasses, with an intelligent and somewhat tired face. After flipping through a few pages of the file, the lawyer sighed. Mrs. Larson, what you have presented is worth thinking about, but there is no Matthew's body. There are no direct witnesses, and Graham will almost certainly deny it. If you want to file a lawsuit, you need at least a lawful declaration or a guide to find the body. He killed her, Eva said, her voice calmly cold. We don't deny that, the lawyer said. But the court is different. The court needs evidence, not feelings, even the feelings of a mother. Eva smiled slightly, not sad, not bitter, but like someone who was used to the answer. Then the law isn't for people who lose children, she said. Leaving the office, Eva stopped at a small tea house on the edge of town, where she used to stop with Lena every time she visited the city. It was still the small wooden tea house with a foggy glass door, chairs upholstered in brown fabric, and the sound of the radio playing softly enough to only hear the violin brush through the space. She sat silently, holding a warm cup of tea, watching the raindrops collect on the table. No one wanted to print the story. No one wanted to hear about a worker who disappeared without a trace, and a child who died in an accident. No one wanted to get involved with an engineer who had been awarded a certificate for efficient resource exploitation. And most of all, no one wanted to believe that justice could choose to be silent. She tried sending the article to 3 other newsrooms, editing the language, rewriting the facts, attaching images, test results, site maps, but the answer was always the same. Unfortunately, our editors believe this is unverifiable information. The content could lead to legal disputes. Thank you, but we cannot use this article. Eva couldn't remember how long she had been sitting in front of the computer screen. She only remembered her eyes gradually drying out and her finger clicking the mouse becoming an unconscious habit. For the first time in weeks, she felt not anger, not pain, but emptiness, like a dry well. One afternoon, she decided to post on a parents' forum in the area. where hundreds of mothers used to share stories about school, cooking, and raising children. The article was titled, "A Mother is Seeking Justice for a Child Who Couldn't Come Home." The content was simple: no bloody photos, no accusations, just what she knew, and a call. If anyone has ever heard, seen, or suspected anything that happened that day, please speak, even if it's just a sound. The article was deleted after 2 hours. The reason? Rumors, damaging the community. That evening, as she was putting away the folder, the phone rang. A strange number. Ava hesitated for a moment, then answered. "I'm Lisa, a freelance journalist. I saw your post get removed from the forum. I managed to read it before it disappeared." The young woman's voice was young, urgent. "I don't have a newsroom backing me, but I have a platform, a small blog, a podcast, and I want to interview you, if you allow me." They met at a late-night cafe, the light dim yellow and the ceiling fan creaking. Lisa was a young girl, her hair tied up, carrying a laptop and recorder. She didn't ask many questions, just opened the tape, placed it on the table, then looked directly at Ava. "Tell me as if you were talking to your daughter." Ava was silent for a moment. Then she spoke. Not in the voice of a grieving mother, but in the voice of someone who had walked through the fog, step by step. From the drawings in the sketchbook, to the rope tangled in the roots. From the sentence in the cafe, "I need this job," to the gaze of the woman who had lost her son. "He's gone. Don't look anymore." She told it like a stream, not angry, not blaming, but leaving no room for evasion. Lisa just nodded, taking notes, and promised, "I will post the article with the title, 'A Mother Writes a Letter to Find Justice for Her Lost Daughter.'" The article was posted 2 days later. It wasn't on the front page. There were no ads. Just an article on Lisa's personal blog with a 17-minute podcast. But one person shared it, then 2, then 10, then hundreds. A mother in the South wrote a comment. "I don't know you, but my child was also unheard. I believe you." A former worker quietly sent a message. "I used to work under Graham. Once I saw him slam the map, but I was scared. I didn't dare say anything." An elementary school teacher wrote, "She reminds me of my mother. When she believes something, no one can stop her." Ava read each line, not to find sympathy, but to know that, finally, she was no longer alone. The glimmer of hope sprouted not from justice, not from the court, but from the very small courage of strangers who dared to open their eyes, dared to listen, dared to stop when they saw a mother calling in a silent market. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor of the district court, a square room, painted a pale beige like every other public facility. No smell of blood, no sense of mourning. It only had silence, a silence as heavy as the bottom of a well. Ava sat in the front row, behind the public defender. She didn't lean back, her spine straight as a planted stake, her eyes still. Her hand was clenched around Lena's old scarf, something she always carried as a silent reminder that she was here for someone. On the other side of the room, Graham Leeds entered, led by 2 police officers. No handcuffs, no bowing. He wore a gray vest, a light blue tie, and a clean shave. Looking at him, he didn't look like someone who could kill someone. No evasive eyes, no fidgeting, no resistance. Only one thing made Ava shudder. Graham had absolutely no expression. The judge read the opening remarks in a familiar, monotonous voice. The list of charges was presented: endangering leading to death, destroying evidence, obstructing criminal investigations, suspicion related to a missing case without a body. Graham pleaded not guilty. He didn't object. He just nodded after each question, as if this was a technical meeting he had attended 1,000 times. Ava watched him all morning, not to glare, but to try to see, in this man, what point reminded her of the monster. There wasn't one. Graham Leeds looked like any successful adult in town. Tall, fair-skinned, speaking clearly, and that was the scariest part. In turn, the witnesses were called. Lena's classmate, Sarah, was called as a witness. She walked slowly to the stand, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes both fearful and resolute. Ava had met her family a few days earlier. She didn't force anything. She just asked, "If you ever knew something that Lena trusted enough to tell you, would you be willing to say it?" And now Sarah stood there, her voice trembling but clear. "Lena told me that one time when she was in the forest, she saw a man, wearing a hard hat, wearing construction clothes, standing alone next to some red wooden stakes. He kept walking back and forth, then suddenly shouted as if he was scolding someone, but there was no one nearby." Sarah swallowed. Lena said she was a little scared, but she said the light at that time was very special, and if she drew it, maybe her mother would understand more about that person. Lena always said, "Drawing is how I see the world without being afraid of it." The whole courtroom was silent. No one said anything, only the rustling of the court clerk's papers and Sarah's steady breathing. Ava sat motionless, her hand clenched. She knew, no legal arguments, no photographic evidence needed. Just this story was enough to see. Her daughter had chosen to step into the light, even if it made people shudder. An assistant engineer who used to work under Graham, he avoided looking at the defendant, just said, "I remember one time Graham and Matthew argued very loudly. Matthew said he would send the real map to management. The next day, Matthew didn't come anymore. We asked, but were told to stay out of it." A construction worker stood up, holding his cloth hat. "I saw Graham return to the site late in the afternoon. Everyone had gone home. He said he forgot something, but the next day, there was a new patch of dug-up earth in that area." A local forester, the first to find Lena's body, said that he didn't understand why the body was so far from the area where people usually passed by. It was like it was placed there, no traces, no sound, just a too perfect silence. Physical evidence was also presented. The DNA-stained rope, the soil sample from the fingernails, photos of the marks on Lena's wrist. But there was still no body for Matthew. It was Graham's turn to be asked. The defendant's lawyer advised him to remain silent. He didn't react, but stood up. The courtroom was silent. The judge asked, "Mr. Leeds, do you have anything to say to the jury?" Graham looked up. His eyes weren't directed at anyone, just swept around, then stopped in the middle of nowhere. He said, slowly, "I didn't want to have to kill anyone. But they got in my way. The fools. And now you want to judge me. Do whatever you want. I don't want to live anymore." No one moved. No one breathed. The judge hammered. "The defendant is silent from here on out." A spectator in the back burst into tears. Not Ava, but Matthew's mother. She had come, sitting quietly in the corner, clutching an old, worn photo. Her face was white, but tears still flowed. Ava didn't take her eyes off him. She didn't feel gloating. She didn't feel relief. Just a void, as if she had finally seen the one who killed her child and discovered that there was nothing special about him. No claws, no blood, no crazy eyes. Just a man standing where he shouldn't have stood, doing what he shouldn't have done, and then choosing silence to keep what he owned. An ordinary person. And that was why he was dangerous. When the defense attorney spoke about work pressure, about unstable mental health during the construction period, Ava almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she was tired. Work pressure doesn't kill people. Fear of being exposed doesn't kill people. The one who killed her child was the choice. Clear, not hasty, not because of a moment of impulse. It was the active choice, to drown silence on the head of a 15-year-old child, just because she saw what she shouldn't have seen. When the trial ended, Graham was led out of the courtroom. He glanced at Eva. That gaze had no resentment, no shame, just a fleeting emptiness, as if looking through a car window where the person opposite was no longer a person. Ava sat still. She had cried already. She had already hurt. Now, There was nothing left to break. Only one thing remained in her heart. What made her sit here, stand there, go to the end? That if she was silent, if she didn't do anything, then Lena's death would be crossed off history like a stain on a construction record. And she couldn't let that happen. It was late autumn, the wind blowing cold on the hillside cemetery north of town. Eva walked slowly through the rows of graves, holding a white chrysanthemum. The ground was damp, fallen yellow leaves covered it in a soft layer under her feet. The air smelled of cold stone and decaying earth, but it wasn't foul. Just the smell of ending, silent and undisturbed. Lena's grave was near the edge of the forest, where Eva had chosen because from here, when she sat down, she could see the sun shining through the pine trees. The stone surface was still smooth, the words still clear. It's not that you're standing in the wrong place. It's that there hasn't been anyone brave enough to stand with you. Eva placed the chrysanthemum down, sitting next to the tombstone. One hand touched the engraved words, the other clenched the old scarf of Lena. Her heart no longer throbbed with pain, but it wasn't completely relieved either. Like a scar that still ached when the weather changed. Not bleeding, but never disappearing. Next to Lena's grave, there was a small headstone, not fully engraved. Only the name, Matthew K. No date of birth, no date of death, no memorial line, a missing stone. But that absence was the silent accusation that he had existed, had disappeared, and had never been named. A small piece of paper was clipped under the stone at the foot of the grave. Eva picked it up. The handwriting was scrawled, "I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough. But I saw, and I spoke." No signature. But she knew it was from someone who still believed he wasn't dead and had bravely spoken the truth. Matthew's mother's house was on the edge of town, old and colder than the first time Eva came. The windows were still closed, the roof still dark. But this time the old woman opened the door without hesitation. Her face was gaunt, her hair white, her figure smaller as if compressed by years of torment. She didn't say anything immediately. She just looked at Eva with red eyes, then suddenly hugged her. Not a greeting, not an inquiry. Just a hug of two mothers. A hug that needed no explanation. "You are so brave," the old woman whispered. "You did things that I didn't dare to do. He had threatened me. I had tried to ask for help everywhere, but somehow they all seemed to be on his side." Eva squeezed her shoulder lightly, then stepped back. Her eyes softened, her voice hoarse. "No, you were very brave too. He has to be punished, not for me, but because the truth can't be hidden forever. Justice sometimes comes late, but it will still come." Matthew's mother turned around, rummaged in the wooden cabinet, then brought out an old hard hat. There was a small tear on the side of the brim. The lining inside was still attached to a dried brown stain, like blood worn away by time. "The police didn't take this," she said. "They said it had no legal value, but I kept it, because I needed to have something to believe it was ever here." Eva took the hat, lifting it with both hands as if afraid of breaking it. Then she opened her bag, taking out a small object, a painted button, brown-yellow, that Lena had attached to her painting bag. "My daughter left this," she whispered. "She always carried it to mark the places she wanted to return to." The two mothers sat there without needing to say more, like two witnesses crossed off the record, trying to remember for each other what was not recognized. On the wall of the house, Eva noticed an old photo. Matthew standing next to his mother, smiling brightly next to a rusty bicycle. The photo was dusty, out of frame. She stood up, adjusting the frame. The old woman watched, her eyes wet. "Thank you," she said softly. "No one has touched it in a long time." That evening, back at home, Eva quietly opened Lena's bookcase. She flipped through the sketchbook again, the one she had looked at again and again, but always had the feeling that something was missing. Near the end, among the drawings of light and sky, she found an unfinished pencil drawing. Two men, one standing, one kneeling. The hands of the one kneeling were raised, his face looking up at the other as if begging for mercy. The brushstrokes were strong, clearly showing despair. No blood, no weapons, just two figures and a plea that was not answered. Eva touched the drawing. For the first time, she didn't cry when she saw it. She just felt choked, as if she was seeing the moment Matthew was erased from the world, just for speaking up. The next morning, Eva returned to the cemetery. She sat down in front of Matthew's stone, holding the small letter-engraving knife. Stroke by stroke, she engraved a new line on the blank stone. 2 people didn't come home, but 1 has been named. Then she placed the brown button on top of the tombstone, letting the wind blow it to the ground if it wanted to. It wasn't to mark Matthew, but to remember that Lena had once not been silent. She bowed her head, whispered, "I'm sorry. I came late, but I came." A breeze swept through like stroking her hair. There was the sound of birds calling far away for the first time in months. Not loud, but just loud enough to hear. In the gray light of a cold morning, Eva stood up, looking at both stones, one complete, one unfinished, then nodded slightly. For the first time in months, the wind blew past her neck without making her shiver. It was no longer something that ripped up memories, but a breath, light, as if someone had whispered thank you behind her. The recording room on the 2nd floor of the local radio station was smaller than Eva thought. There were only 2 microphones, an old wooden table with worn corners, and green moss soundproof walls. The air smelled of electricity dust and damp cloth, not pleasant, but not bad either. In front of her was a soundproof glass. Behind that, the technician was checking the wave. The presenter, a woman in her 30s named Emily, leaned over and said softly, "You don't need to tell everything. We can cut or stop if you feel overwhelmed." Eva nodded, but in her head, there was no concept of stop. She had survived everything. Through the death of her daughter, the indifference of the system, the averted gaze of society, even Graham's short laugh before the dock. Nothing made her afraid to speak anymore, and if there was anything left for her to do, it was to tell again, for her child, and for other children, those who had stood on the edge of darkness and light without anyone holding their hand. The red light came on. The microphone opened. Emily's voice rang out gently. "Dear listeners, today we invite someone who is not a writer, not a politician, and not an expert. Just a mother who has gone through a journey that many of us don't dare to imagine." Emily turned. "Ms. Eva, if you're ready, you can start." Eva looked down, taking out a piece of paper from her bag, the letter that Lena never had time to send. She placed it next to her daughter's old painting box, opened the pen, adjusted the microphone. Her voice rang out hoarse, slow, as if drawing each word from an old scar. She was only 15 years old. She loved the light. She said the light in the forest sometimes looked like it had a soul. I promised her that I would let her believe in the light. I kept my word. But in some places, the light takes a long time to reach. Emily was about to say something, but then folded her hands, signaling the technician to be silent. Eva continued. Her voice broke, then tightened again, as if someone were squeezing her hand behind her back. That afternoon, she left with her sketchbook, her watercolor box, and a map in her head. I didn't know that the map led her to a man who was desperate. I didn't know that place would have no way back. The studio was silent. Emily didn't ask anything, didn't interrupt, didn't cut. The technician didn't signal that time was up. They just sat there, listening, as if they were seeing something that had no shape, but everyone could feel. Eva bowed her head slightly, then closed the letter. Thank you for listening. Not for me, but for her. The broadcast was posted that night. No ads, no background music, just the voice of a mother telling a story with no room for anger, only room for those who wanted to step forward and stand with her. The next morning, the station's inbox was overloaded. Nearly 200 emails, over 100 letters sent by mail. One handwritten letter on grid paper, the scrawled handwriting of a child. Ms. Ava, I listened to your program. I saw my friend being hit by another friend, but I was afraid to say anything. But from now on, I won't be silent anymore, because I don't want my friend to disappear without anyone calling their name. An elementary school teacher shared, I will dedicate the first lesson each week to talking to students about speaking up, not just about anti-bullying, but about daring to say what is right. That afternoon, Ava sat alone in the living room, her hand placed on Lena's painting box, something she had never dared to fully open since her death. It still had color. There were still some crumpled papers, a stubby pencil. She hugged the painting box to her chest. For the first time, it no longer felt as heavy as carrying the whole wound, but like hugging back a part of her daughter, not to cling to, but to let go in a dignified way. That evening, Ava wrote a letter, not sending it to anyone, just putting it on the windowsill. My love, today some people heard your story. Some children understood that the light doesn't come alone. It needs a guide, and you were the first. Thank you. Outside the window, it was dusk, but somewhere, she believed, the light was coming. A year had passed. The forest changed leaves again, and the slope where it was once covered in cold rain the day Lena was found was now lightly mossy. The autumn wind swept through the low bushes, making the leaves swirl in circles, as if painting a slow motion of time in the sky, not erasing the loss, but not freezing it. That afternoon, the sky wasn't scorching, but bright. A brightness just enough to clearly see every detail, the cracks on the bark of the tree, the footprints printed on the damp earth, and the young faces gradually gathering by the slope. Eva stood there early. She wore a wood-colored coat, holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, her back still straight as a stake on the path. Her face was unmade up, her gray hair neatly bunned behind. She didn't say anything, just watched the children going up the slope, one by one, holding paintings, paper flowers, printed poems, their eyes not afraid. Today was the day to commemorate Lena. Not a big organization, not flashy. Just a small appointment in a letter sent to parents of the town school. Anyone who wants to come, please bring something to stand with her. It doesn't have to be flowers. It doesn't have to be words. The new memorial stone was erected a week ago. This time, it wasn't just the old hand-carved line. A flat piece of stone above had been carved with the drawings of students in the school, a collective drawing proposed by the art teacher. On the stone was a drawing of a short-haired girl, holding a palette, standing in the middle of a circle of light. Around her were shadows of people, their faces unclear, but all facing the girl. An imperfect painting, but full of breath, innocent, pure, and fiercely gentle. Ava didn't touch the drawing. She just stood looking, as if wanting to ask, "Is this what you dreamed of, Lena? A day when people would look directly at the light you saw?" The children took turns reading poetry. One student in the 4th grade, his voice stammering but persistent. "We promise if we see something wrong, we will tell the teacher, our mother, each other." One student in the 6th grade put down another drawing, a scene of the forest with 3 shadows. "I drew Lena, Matthew, and Lena's mother. I think those 3 are now sitting and talking together." An old teacher brought her young daughter. The little girl was about 8 years old, her hair tied in pigtails, her eyes round. She shyly came to Eva, offering a folded piece of paper. "I drew this," she said. "I think if Lena wasn't afraid, then I don't need to be afraid either." Ava bent down to receive the paper. The drawing was a bridge made of rainbow colors, spanning a dark ravine. At the head of the bridge was a little girl, holding a flashlight high. At the end of the bridge, a group of young friends was approaching. Eva couldn't respond. She just nodded, placing her hand on her head. The wind blew through the slope, making the skirts of adults and the hair of children fly lightly. No one spoke loudly. No one called a name. but the air carried something very clear, a kind of silent connection between the past and the present, between pain and hope. Ava stepped forward to the memorial stone. She placed the bouquet of flowers down, adjusted the scarf embroidered with Lena's name, then stood still. Then she spoke. No microphone needed, no reporters, no recording. "Mom is still here, my love." A very light sentence. But the wind suddenly stopped, as if to listen. Not a complete justice, not a fairy tale ending, but an ending with meaning. A child no longer forgotten, a witness no longer silent, a mother, finally, no longer alone. When the memorial ended, everyone quietly went down the slope. No one said goodbye. No one took pictures. They just left flowers, paintings, handwritten promises, and a piece of land that was no longer cold. Ava was the last to stay. She sat down, placing her hand on the ground beside the stone, not praying, not needing to, just simply being present, in the same place, once again, not to run away or cling to, but to say, "I was here, and so were you." Above, the sun was slowly setting over the shoulder of the forest. The light wasn't harsh, just enough to see clearly. That pain, if spoken, could become a bridge, and memory, if named, could become a place to stand together.